Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Profitable Content Podcast. I am super excited because I have Andrew here who is going to talk to us a little bit about, first of all, websites, which y'all all know I do not like to do, and content creation. So, Andrew, if you would please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks. It's really great to be here, Jessica. Andrew Schulkind is my name. My company is Andigo. We build websites and do content marketing almost exclusively for B2B businesses and mostly smaller businesses in the sort of $2 to $25 million range. We don't have a particular industry focus. We tend to work a lot with mission-driven businesses, though, folks who are trying to make the world a better place, which makes our work interesting just by virtue of the folks that we're working with, really. As much as the work we do ourselves. So we've been at it for quite a while, since before content marketing was a buzzword, since before there were all sorts of really cool CMS tools to make websites with more easily. Although I get your frustration or annoyance or whatever, because they're not necessarily easy, even when the tools have made them easier.
I started doing building websites in about 2007, I think it was. And yeah, it was not WordPress, forget about it. So tell us some of the changes that have happened and what you're kind of seeing with your clients around websites. What are some of the most popular platforms to be on, and why should we choose to be on these platforms?
So let's see, I'll start with a little bit of history. When we started, we very much wanted not to be a fill in the blank shop, a WordPress shop or a Joomla shop or a WordPress shop or a Drupal shop, because that always felt to me like, well, now you're going to come to me with a project and I'm going to try and fit that peg into the hole I've got, whether it's square or round or whatever. So we used a lot of different tools. All the tools we used happened to be on the same technology platform, the so-called LAMP stack. I won't bother going into that. If you know what it is, then you're a geek. And if you don't, then you don't want to know. And there was a pretty bright line. Like, we used Drupal for much more complex projects, and we used WordPress for simpler projects. And over the years, WordPress has grown into this behemoth that it is. And they really, I think, paid more attention to the back end, or they knew their audience better, or knew they just had a different audience. So with one exception, literally one person over all those years that we worked, with Drupal, one of our clients said, "Oh, I love this. This is great." I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to hire you," because everyone hates this back end, from a client standpoint in terms of editorial content control. And WordPress really does well. A lot of people like it, and sort of the network effect kicks in. Clients who come from another company want to stick with WordPress because now they're building a new website and they're already familiar with how it works and what they need to do. So most of our work is in WordPress these days. We keep a close eye on and have done a handful of projects with Wix and Squarespace, with Shopify as well, although because we're mostly a B2B shop, that doesn't come into play as much, although their growth and how much more robust that platform is really, really impressive. But Wix and Squarespace are starting to mature, whereas they were very much, maybe still are a little bit, sort of a prosumer level tool, right? Consumers can really do it. They're making it, a little bit easier for folks with a little bit more experience to get in, sort of dive in under the hood and do a little bit more customization than most people would want to do. So I think that those tools are pretty fantastic, particularly for smaller organizations where WordPress, one of the conversations that we have with clients overall, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit when we talk about content marketing and marketing more broadly. If you've got X number of dollars in your budget for your marketing this year, please don't put all of that into a website, because you need more, the website itself isn't going to do anything. And one thing that people don't recognize, beyond the need for ongoing marketing, of course, is that a WordPress website is really going to require maintenance. You yourself in your organization, or an agency like ours, or a freelancer, someone is going to need to check in on that website every month, do the updates to the plugins that you're using, to the core, etc. Otherwise, because it is such a popular platform, it is also a huge target for hackers. So that's one of the things that you sort of offload when you work with a hosted solution like Wix or Squarespace, because that's part of the money you pay every month. Instead of paying for hosting, you probably pay a little bit more for Wix and Squarespace, but they're taking care of all that. You don't need to pay someone to do the maintenance. They're doing it for you. So it's pretty attractive if that's the nature of your organization, if your resources are such that you just need to put resources elsewhere and not to that. So I think any and all of those platforms are an excellent choice, and it really just depends on who you are and what you need, and both from a technology standpoint and a functionality standpoint, and just sort of how demanding your site needs, your needs are in terms of design, because WordPress is going to give you way more freedom, or that freedom is easier to come by than on the hosted platforms.
I am so glad that you went into that. I have to tell you that I've had folks who shun me and look down upon the Wix and the Squarespace. They're like, "You're using Wix?" And I'm glad that you said that. And I didn't realize it until I was doing some research on you just to prepare for this interview. And I heard you say exactly what you just said. And I said, oh my gosh, he is so right. Because I keep getting notifications that my plugin isn't working. This other thing isn't working. Something else has stopped, connecting to whatever else. Or if folks have gone to my website and they've gone, oh, it says it's at capacity or whatever was going on. And I'm like, I don't have the time to monitor this every single month, day, whatever needs to happen. So thank you for sharing that. And I feel like a lot of content creators need to know that.
Yeah. And the thing that we used to hear about WordPress all the time when it was in its infancy, we now hear about Wix and Squarespace. And that is, oh, I can tell that's a WordPress site the minute I look at it. And that, there was some truth to that then, and there is some truth to that now about these newer platforms, because people who don't have any coding skills, who probably have a very little graphic design skills, they just log in, pick a template, and start uploading their content. And that's a beautiful thing. If depending on where your brand is and what's important, you don't need it to be anything more than that. And quite honestly, there is a sameness right now to design. I don't think it's just with websites. I think a lot of cars look all the same. Websites look all the same. It's really remarkable how, we have all sort of, regressed to the mean, or just converged on what, someone decided, hey, this is how things should look and this is how things should work. So I'm not surprised that people have, looked down on you to say that. I'm sure they came from a coding background that, it's always the coders who are like, oh, well, that's not right. That's not fancy enough. So.
Right. And I think that when we talk to like content creators and just folks who are in marketing specifically, we want to look like we know something that someone else doesn't, or we want to look like we have the thing that's doing something that somebody else isn't doing, where we don't run into that so much on the B2B side. The B2B side is just like, we just want it to function. Does it look okay? Are things working and doing what they need, them to do?
That's right. Are we meeting our audience's expectations in comparison to our competition? Are we, we don't want to be an outlier. You don't want to look like you were super cheap about it, and you don't want to look like this is, the be all and end all, that, everything you've sunk everything into this super fancy website, and there's no, I don't know, stake to the sizzle, I guess.
So with the next question that came up to mind for me is a $10,000 website still a thing? Is that still something that content creators should be investing in, or just tell us when that should be an investment or something that we should take into consideration?
That's a really interesting question. And is it still a thing? Yes. What I'm sort of thinking through, and should it be a thing? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. Right. So, to be really open about it, our projects, website development projects, typically start at the sort of the $15,000 level, right? So we're typically doing things from, mostly from, the $20,000 to $50,000 is really where most of our projects are. We're not going to be super helpful if someone has a $5,000 or $8,000 budget for their project. Not to say that we never do projects in that range. It's typically with folks that we've worked with before, that we know how it's going to go in terms of, expectations. There's a shared set of expectations. What I was thinking as you asked the question was, is $10,000 the number now? Because it used to be, like ages ago, it was like $3,000. Everyone thought that's what a website should cost, just, bare bones, down and dirty, right? And I don't know if it's $10,000 or if it's $6,000 or $8,000, but there are folks out there who build websites at that price point that are really good. You're not going to get the same level of consideration that a larger shop would give you in terms of sort of diversity of perspectives, right? You probably have someone who is a graphic designer who has learned how to use Wix or Squarespace really well, right? Or you have a coder who is reasonably adept at adapting existing templates for whether it's WordPress or Wix or Squarespace. That's who you're going to work with, and sort of that one person band has its limitations, but also can knock things out very quickly and can do it at a really competitive price point. So for the proverbial, two-person accounting firm, or, 3 lawyers working together as a partnership, I don't know that there's really any return on a $15,000 or $20,000 investment for a website, unless you have a real marketing machine behind that and know, hey, we are very specialized, very focused. All we do is accounting work for visual artists or recording artists, or there's we work with restaurants. That's all we do. We're lawyers who work with restaurants. So maybe that it does make sense to put that much money in there. But beyond that, no, a smaller company, whether B2B or B2C, a smaller investment just makes a whole lot more sense.
I am so loving this conversation. Because it's kind of like, do you know who your target audience is or not? Do you have a marketing budget behind it or not? Because really, you should not be investing in a $10,000 website if you don't have the marketing machine behind it. I love that piece of it. And I think for a lot of us, I've worked with several organizations that were pretty big, and they just figured, a $20,000 website should be doing everything for us.
Yeah, that's typically not going to happen.
Just because you spent the money doesn't mean that it does it. So let's get into what actually needs to happen after you pay that 20,000, that 10,000. And then I want to get into a little bit of your business brain. But once you've paid that money for the website to be built, what are some things that you need to have in order for it to work for you?
Well, I'm going to flip the premise of your question a little bit and say that part of what we should be talking about is what happens before you're done. So you've paid the money, but it's part of that $20,000, at least from our perspective. What you're getting is the conversations during the discovery process that we're gonna dive into, and we're not going to start with design. We're not going to start with functionality. We're not going to start with a site map. That's probably pretty easy to sort of suss out, at some point. But we're going to start with message. Who is your target audience? How many segments are there to your target audience? What are you trying to tell them? What are they interested in? What's their pain point? Why are they out there looking at websites like your companies and your competitors when they could be out making money or doing the work that they do? They're there because they're trying to answer a question, and you need to know what that question is, what those questions are, so that your website can answer them. And the discovery process, that's where we're going to sit down and ask you those questions, make sure that we're all understanding what the goals are for the website, who we need to be speaking to, and how we need to organize the website so that we are answering their questions, and so that people come to the website and feel like, oh yes, this company gets me. They really understand what it is I'm up against and what issue I'm facing. They're a natural fit for helping us solve that problem. And that, goes into not just, thinking about design, right? Like, because there's different audiences are going to have different design expectations, but how the website is organized, because the number of segments that you have is going to factor into that. Even to the style of writing, which we certainly want to get into and talk about. You and I will talk about this in a minute, I'm sure, but we want to talk with our clients about, hey, are you looking at this from their perspective, not your own? Is your website outward facing, asking questions and, trying to appeal to your audience? Or is it all about you and what you do and how you do it? Which at some level, people do want to know that, but first they want to know that you can help them. That's the first question. Once you answer that, then you get to go deeper.
Well, look, and I was just about to say that word. You're getting deep, Andrew. You're getting deep. And I think that that's a lot of the things, it amazes me how many people I talk to about their content. And they're going, okay, my content just isn't working. People are resonating. I'm not getting engagement. And I'll ask them a series of questions. And I'll go, no one's ever asked me that. You paid a coach $30,000 and they didn't ask you this?
Right.
What's going on? You know? So it's really interesting. So let's move into your book a bit. Tell us about the book. What's the title of the book again?
The title of the book is Marketing for Small B2B Businesses. And like I think every other book on the market today, it has the obligatory super long subtitle, which in this case is How Content Creates Marketing Muscle and Powers Traditional and Digital Marketing. So
yes.
No surprises. Once you've read the cover, you know what you're getting into.
Right. Content. Let's talk about the content. I know there's a lot of creators that listen to the podcast. There's a lot of business owners that listen to the podcast. So let's get into Andrew's business brain. When you wrote this book, who were you intending to write this book for and why? Why now?
I was absolutely intending to write it for the small B2B business owner or business marketer. Again, that's sort of the folks I have in mind. The stories that I share, little anecdotes that I share in the book are all from our clients. So all sort of these businesses between $2 and $25 million. So that's the folks we're trying to reach. It's B2B, so it's not brand driven, the way Coca-Cola or Apple are. It's not about anything like that I think a lot of people without hands-on experience with their own marketing just sort of think about. Well, this is advertising, this is marketing, this is what I see on TV, this is Mad Men, and that's really not appropriate for a small business. So we go through and we talk about marketing mindset and really what it means to do marketing for a small business, what marketing and branding and sales have to do with each other and how they all work together. Talk about goals and the importance of making sure that you have marketing goals for everything that you do, from building a website down to just a single social media post. I don't think anything that you put out there, you're expecting, well, this is the thing that's going to land us the huge contract, but each one of those things has to contribute to that if that's the goal, right? So making sure that there are goals in place is important. I think we also want to walk through sort of what the value you are creating with your marketing, right? Clearly, everyone knows about talking about the value proposition, unique selling propositions, what it is that you do that makes it worth spending $1 with you, so that in hopes that your clients have the hope of getting $2 back or more. But there's also this idea that marketing today isn't really about selling. It isn't really about convincing people that you are, the greatest and best choice based on things that you're telling them, but demonstrating that by helping them, by showing that you understand their problem, by showing that your solution is appropriate or not, depending on who they are. We don't want to try and appeal to everyone, but that's, we want to make sure that the marketing is creating value for our target audience, which means helping them answer the questions that they're trying to answer. And I think I feel like I've gone on for a little while here without. Now I've forgotten the question. Reel me back in, Jessica.
It's okay. No, it's okay. But I think you gave some insight into the topics that you talk about in the book. So do you consider yourself a content creator?
Absolutely. Yeah. And
tell me why do you consider yourself a content creator?
Well, in part because I have to be, right? Like I have to walk the walk if we're going to talk the talk, right? Like this is what we do for our clients. So we do it for ourselves. And in fact, that's how the book came about. I publish a lot of content on our social media channels, LinkedIn primarily, but Twitter as well, and on Andigo's website, and for a couple of other digital and print publications as well, all of whom are, speaking.
Just ad week,
Target marketing was, I guess, sort of subsumed by Adweek, but Biznology as well, a handful of others. And it was through that A Press, the publisher of my book, saw my work and said, hey, would you like to write a book for us? And so that's how it came about. So I am definitely a content creator. And in fact, I'll say that my career really was impacted by Google and the other search engines, of course, but primarily Google, taking steps against black hat SEO. When they started putting the emphasis on on-page content, where you couldn't put white text on a white background and hide it at the bottom of the page and, do all that kind of stuff. Technical SEO still matters, but like all of a sudden now it's about content, and it grows even more important content, rather than just meta tags and behind the scenes things. That for me was like, wow, now we're talking, because I'm not a coder by trade, and I'm nobody's idea of a visual designer. I draw stick figures and they're not straight, so I'm really a message person or a content person. And so that it all came together, and that's really when Andigo hit its stride. And that's when I realized, hey, I really, really love doing this. I just like doing this. So yes, I'm a content creator.
I love it. And so as a content creator, where do you feel like you fall in this industry? Is it more on the blog writing? Is it more, just social media content, putting out, quotes, things to that effect? Tell us a little bit about kind of your content journey. What was the first thing that you wrote or put out there?
The first thing I wrote absolutely was a blog post, I'm sure. And I think that the blog led to, because that was what was there, right? The social media as a content platform didn't really exist in the same way that it does now. And boy, that's not that long ago that we're talking about.
No, right? As you said it, I was like, listen, boys and girls, it wasn't always this way.
Yeah, I mean, I get that I'm, a gray-haired guy, but I'm, and I have been in the industry for a while, but it's not like this is ancient history. It was just not that long ago that, a blog was kind of the way to do it, right? So a blog, and that led to speaking invitations, which of course means deck creation, right? You've got to create a presentation and a deck to go along with it. And that's sort of a content form in and of itself, right? You don't want to be the person standing up there reading the slide bullet point by bullet point, but you do want to create that right balance between interesting visuals and enough for audience to sort of grab onto in those bullet points, and then you get to expand on it. So they're paying attention to you, not the slide primarily, right? That was a little bit of a tangent. And then, of course, that has led to more social media as social media became more of a publishing platform, right? Even LinkedIn, you can publish not just posts, but articles, right? And that also is relatively new in the grand scheme of things. So I would say now, certainly in terms of frequency, it's much more content on social media. Because that's where the audience is, right? And if you're doing a good job there, that's what's going to help bring your audience to your website, where there's a chance to go deeper, where there's a chance for a conversion to happen, whether that's a micro conversion, like getting them to download something, or a larger conversion, like they email you or pick up the phone and call, as if that happens very much anymore, and say, hey, I'd like to learn more. I'd like to, talk about potentially engaging you, which of course is the goal.
So as a content creator, when you moved into the space and you wrote your first blog post, like, what was that feeling like to hit publish on that? What were you expecting to have happen?
I was expecting a giant hole to open up and me to fall into it. I was just so, it was just so crazy. Like, well, is anyone gonna read this? And if they read it, are they gonna laugh at it? Like, the last time I had someone read something, it was a professor in college, right? Like no one, like that's right. Like for most people, that's the experience. Like I don't write anymore professionally, except, if that's your job as a writer. So it was really nerve-wracking, especially since, in my head, I'm like, I'm a good writer. I know what I'm doing. And, there's a difference between being able to concisely convey whatever it is you're talking about in an email to a client, and writing, even if it's just 350 words, as a blog post. Is there a style to it? Are you, so it was really nerve-wracking. And I'll be honest, I didn't have an expectation. I wasn't really sure what we were doing. And it took a while, of course, before we sort of hit a stride and realized, all right, these are the kinds of things we should be writing about. This is the audience we have to have in mind when we're writing it, etc. All of that seems so obvious isn't necessarily easy when you're first starting out in particular. And I will absolutely admit, and I talk about this in the book a bit, and I talk about it with clients all the time about there's a temptation, particularly for folks who are comfortable writing, to just look around and, you know, say, oh, hey, this is, I've read about this week. I'm gonna comment on that and create a blog post out of that, or a social media post, or whatever it might be. And that's great. You know, being topical is great, but you're not a columnist, you know, in a newspaper. You're there writing for a purpose. So it shouldn't be that reactionary. It should be, hey, we have a editorial calendar we want to stick with. We have goals that we want to try and hit, and what are we going to do to hit those goals? How's the content going to fulfill that strategic initiative?
I'm glad that you said that. As we kind of move into getting clients who are B2B clients, when we create blog posts or videos or any of that content, what would be like some of the tips that you would tell a content creator, or just an entrepreneur, right? Just a business owner that is creating content? What are some of the tips that you would give to them to start creating content, to open that line way of having a conversation with a B2B, right? Especially on LinkedIn.
Let's see. Well, I'm not sure that this is specific to LinkedIn, but I will say that I have written and said this more times than anyone around me wants to hear, but your prospects don't care about you. Your prospects don't even care about what you do. Your prospects care about what you can do for them. And that, if you keep that in mind, what is it that they really want if they're investing the time in researching, reading, listening to videos, podcasts, whatever? What is it what question are they trying to answer? What are they trying to learn? And if you focus your content on answering those sets of questions, that's the only way that your content can be effective. It's got to be that, right? There's limited ways, you know, you can be really viral and effective, you know, with personality, or just with, you know, just interesting production values, or you know, some sort of house style along those lines. But it's all going to come down to, hey, is this answering my questions, particularly for B2B? Are my questions being answered? And is this someone who I am beginning to trust as a person who has answers that are going to be good for my business?
Now, how do we find out what those problems are so that we can address them in posts, blogs, things to that effect?
No shortcut but listening, right? That's it. You really do have to listen to what you hear your prospects telling you, what you hear them asking you. You need to pay attention to what your prospects are, how they are reacting to the content that you're putting out there, both in person and you know, mediated fashion. You need to listen to your current clients, what's working for them, what's not. Are you losing clients? Are you aware why you're losing clients? What is it that you're doing? Because that's one of the things that I really do stress for small businesses in particular, but really for large businesses too. I think it's true. Marketing, isn't this thing that ends once the sale happens, right? Every touch point is a marketing opportunity, and you either gain points with your clients, or you lose them. You either fulfill the promise that your marketing made, or you don't, in which case inertia might keep them with you for a while, but eventually they're going to leave because you're not doing what you said you would, or you're not quite doing what you said you would. So, you know, listening along all those ways, and I think critically also listening to your whoever else is on your team, anyone who has contact with your clients or prospects. Listen to what they're saying, and quite honestly, even other folks. If your team's large enough that there's a, you know, sort of product development team, listen to what they're saying about what works and what doesn't, and you know, what features are being used and not being used. Where are people, you know, investing their time when they're using your tools or your products? I think that's the only way to come up with the content that really addresses what is of greatest interest to your target audience.
What are some things that have worked for you in doing this?
What are some things that have worked for us?
As far as content, you know, driving sales or driving leads, I'll put it that way. As far as your content driving leads, what are the things that are working right now for you?
Let's see. we've got a mix of things. Of course, it's always having content out there on the website. Although I have to admit, I realized the last 6 weeks we have fallen off a little bit from our usual schedule, and that needs to change. That's always a little bit of a like, hey, we really can't do that given who we are. Not that I would recommend it for anyone. So keeping a steady stream of content out there and being consistent in your message, in the kind of things that you're producing, and in the problems that you're addressing. That, I would say, more than anything, is a great way to for us to generate leads, because there is something to that constancy, something about trustworthiness and steadiness. It's like, all right, they're still here, and particularly for the kinds of folks that we're targeting, there isn't a need today, right? Necessarily, they might come across us, they might become aware of us, but the budget for this year is already set, or they just redid their website, or they're not sure that they've got buy-in from department heads on a content creation program. That's all going to have to wait. And if we can stay top of mind for them, and I think this is true for anyone who has a longer sales cycle, that's really critical. And it even works to our benefit, right? We just literally have a contract out waiting for a signature on it today from a client that we first met in January of 2022, right? So along the way, it wasn't just me checking in to make sure that they were still interested, or that things were moving along the budget process, but it was me sharing content that things that I thought would be of interest, things that I thought would be useful and relevant to them, things that I thought my primary point of contact would share with the decision makers who I didn't have access to necessarily. And that's a critical part of staying relevant and staying on the radar and staying, continuing to provide value over the course of the sales cycle. So now, is that marketing or is it sales? I think that there's probably an argument in one direction or the other, but for us, that's a really important part of us closing a high percentage of the opportunities that we're presented with.
Yeah, great segue. Marketing and sales. How do you, as a business owner, where do you draw the line? Where do you say, okay, yeah, this is the marketing piece, and then this is definitely the sales piece? And then you have a dedicated team towards both, or do they intermingle and mesh some?
For small businesses, I think there's much more likely to be an intermingling, and I think that's a really wonderful thing. There's real strength in that, because boy, you can read a ton of material about the silos in larger organizations, and marketing doesn't know what sales is doing, and sales doesn't like the leads that marketing is generating. And there's that whole mess that a smaller organization typically doesn't have to deal with, or hopefully is not dealing with. And for us, we think of it as this three-parted thing, that I will never say that sales is easy, but it's a whole lot easier if it's resting on a base of really solid marketing. And below that, marketing, again, not necessarily easy ever, but it's a whole lot easier if there's a foundation of really solid branding underneath that. So trying to put all those three together and figuring out where one ends and one begins. I mean, there's some things that are pretty obvious, one or the other, but there has to be that continuum, and there has to be cooperation amongst them. So hopefully people are thinking that way. And I honestly, that is a much more common thing, or a much less common thing for us to deal with, given who our clients are. There just isn't that that huge separation. Folks are they're sitting right next to each other, and sometimes it's the same person just wearing two hats.
Okay, so I want to, like I said, get into a business brain, but I want to bring it back into the book, right? As you wrote this book, as you put things down on literal paper, and you have this book out on Amazon, what are some of the things that you're hoping that this book will help entrepreneurs, small businesses with?
I hope that it's going to help them be less intimidated by the whole idea, right? So it's not just websites and it's not just content that I'm talking about. I dive into, branding and why branding matters, what branding, what the difference between sort of, branding is, much more broadly than just visual design, which there is, a component to your branding, but also website technology and security and privacy, which you and I were talking about earlier, and just how daunting that can be. And it doesn't have to be. There are ways that you can work around that and not have to worry about it so much if you don't have the resources, or you feel your resources could be better spent elsewhere. I hope they'll realize whether or not their website needs to be the hub of what they're doing as a marketing organization. For most companies, it does, but particularly in the B2C more than B2B fields, that's not necessarily the case. You find a lot more companies putting a lot more focus on various social media platforms, TikTok and Instagram, etc. Like those, that probably isn't going to be the case for a B2B company, but it might be. You should absolutely understand going in what the best way is going to be to reach your target audience and convert them, right? It's not just about reaching them, it's engaging them and getting them to make a decision. Your website's probably going to figure into that, but it's not going to do it on its own. So trying to understand all of that and put that all together and understand, even some buzzwords or things that are maybe a little bit more advanced. I don't know if that's I'll swear by that, but landing pages and lead magnets and lead products and things like that are pretty important as well for a small business, especially any small business with a complex sale. And, not the kind of thing that someone's going to look at the website, make a decision. This is the stapler for me. If it's something they're going to think about and want to dive more deeply into, then you want a way to stay with them while they're doing that deeper dive.
So I want to learn a little bit more about Andrew. I have like 3 more questions. What did you want to be when you grew up as a kid?
Oh my gosh. What did I want to be when I grew up? Well, I was really into horses and riding when I was a kid. And so at one point I wanted to be a farrier, someone who put shoes on horses, which is not a, my mother's like, you can be anything you want once you graduated from college. So I did want to be a veterinarian for a long, long time. I come from a long line of mathematicians and physicists and scientists and just, sort of hard science. I think my mom was a chemist before she became a mom, just hard science people. So I was a little bit off to the side there with my focus on writing and art. And my college degree is in philosophy. So I don't know. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but it's fun figuring it out.
How did you venture into websites? What made you decide, yeah, you know what? Websites are it. This is it.
This will give away my age. I started at a time when it was a completely immature field, and I was working in video post-production. And that whole industry was going digital like overnight. It was just changing. And I started a company before Andigo with a partner who worked in corporate travel of all things. And Philips was his company's big client. And he saw that, and Philips had co-developed CD-ROMs with Sony. And so he saw what was going on there. So just by accident, we were like, hey, this is really taking off. We should start a company that does this kind of stuff. And at first, we were doing more consumer things, and my partner and I split up, and he went consumer and I went B2B, but it was really sort of accidental. And, it was just, I look at it now and it's just such a happy accident because it's such a perfect mix for me of messaging and sort of thinking about how to present ideas with technology and with visual design. I mean, it's just it's a wonderful mix. It's a really interesting field still.
You are kind of putting shoes on the horse. It's just a different type of horse.
I'm gonna tell my mom that. She'll be thrilled to know that.
They're running. It's just not a physical horse. So I love that. I usually ask that question because I find that there's a little there are ties to what we want it to be and then how that ties into who we are.
Indeed.
If there's one thing that you hope and kind of foresee your content doing for others, what would that one thing be?
I know this will sound ridiculous, but I hope it changes the world in some way for the better. Like that comes out of our work with these mission-driven businesses, bottom line companies, and folks who really it's about whether it's making the world a better place or just making something in their industry that they recognize as being less than optimal better. It's a powerful lesson that I'm presented with every day, and I hope that the book that I just published is going to help marketers, but I also hope that we can find a way also to continue supporting these companies that are making the world a better place, so that I can at least go to bed at night feeling like, hey, we made a difference. All these problems in the world, and at least we're not making them worse. Maybe we're making them better.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on. That's a wonderful way to end this. Tell everyone where they can find you, and most of all, where they can get the book.
So the book is on Amazon. If you search my name, Andrew Schulkind, you'll find it that way. If you search marketing for small B2B businesses and my name, you'll find it there as well. You can find me on Andigo.com is our corporate website, and Andrew Schulkind, Schulkind. Thanks. It's been a pleasure to be here. Really appreciate it.